Now looking at this picture here, my original shed, which in this photo is the part that's colored red with the white scallops on it, you can see that the roof holds snow on it. And originally this part of my shed was built in the 1970s by an IBM engineer that I don't know why he didn't put more pitch on the roof, but it doesn't drain water off like it should. It doesn't drain snow off. And the problem that I find is that the roof is very inefficient. And keep in mind, I got this shed about maybe 10 years ago, and it was given to me by the people that, moved into the mobile home park that it came from. It came off their lot. They didn't want it. They had another shed they were putting in. So I kind of inherited this thing, and it's just a real nightmare to deal with because it's only 8 foot by 8 foot. And like I say, this is the red part of the shed. And you can kind of see what I built here with the unpainted wood and the green tin roof. This is what I'm going to be highlighting in this video. Looking at the shed from the back side, you can see again that lean-to style shed roof that I've got shown here with the tin panels on it. Just because it leaks so bad, I had to do something to cover it up. And when you look at where that flashing is, it's probably not the best, job to keep water and stuff out of the shed, but it does work. And I sealed it with some silicone. But that whole back wall of that upper roof section, that's all going to move back to where the end of that tin roofing is. And that'll give me 8 foot of storage that's almost 6 foot high in the center. The back addition shown here is basically, that's where I store my mowers. So I have the whole 16 foot by 8 foot space in the front has my work area and storage. But the back section, that was kind of an afterthought after I realized I really wanted to get the mowers out of the way. The wooden frame structure you see, like, kind of just leaned up against the opening there. That's the beginning of the ramp that I'm building, that folds down out of that section and allows me to roll the mowers up into it without having to lift them. I've got a bad back and I got problems with my hips and knees, so lifting things usually is kind of a problem. And putting a ramp on there just makes it a lot easier because I could just wheel the push mower up in there or pull it back out as I need to. And looking at the back side of this a little bit further, if you really pay attention, you'll notice that the wood I used here to sheathe the whole outside of it is all pallet wood, and I used part of a large shipping crate to cover up some of the area too. I think, once I get this in paint, it'll definitely look a lot better. But I've got to do some sealing to get the cracks between the pallet slats to line up, which I'll do from the inside. Currently, the front now is painted, which you'll see in later photos, but the back side isn't. And again, you can see how the angle of that roof, the original slanted lean-to roof, it actually cups in the middle if you look at this picture close enough. So the water just sits in the center of the shed's roof in that cup, in that bowling. So, and this here is the front edition of the shed. Now, to save money, if you look really closely at the bottom edge of the shed, that would be the floor underneath it, you'll notice that the floor is actually 4 pallets. I used 4 pallets that are the same size to give me an 8 foot by 8 foot dimension. And then they're bolted together with carriage bolts, nuts, and washers. And then they've got a few nails in there too to kind of help hold and align the wood into place. So the whole thing's bolted fast to the front of the shed and then to itself. and then I laid down a sheet of OSB over the top of both sides to give it a floor before I started building the sidewalls. And though you really can't tell by the front side of this, the photos here, the inside of that, the inside of the walls are actually pallets going between the beams that go, the upright beams, which the whole shed is built kind of like a pole barn. So the pallets between the beams are only there to support it laterally. The pallets are actually in there horizontally. And I did this as the stretchers that go across from beam to beam to hold them perpendicular to each other. Another couple of things I'd like to point out is, you notice how the ramp here in this photo is a different color. That came from a friend of mine that was tearing his ramp off of his shed, and he was going to throw it out, and then he came down the day he tore it off and asked me if I wanted it, which is why it's gray. Currently I've got that painted to match the color of the shed that I've got. But another thing too is the roof panels you see here, the tin roof. Actually, this guy on Craigslist was giving the stuff away. He had tore down a awning and a shed that he owned. He had the steel roof panels just laying around, and he had posted a free thing on Craigslist. So the cost of my ramp and the cost of the roof was absolutely free. Another thing that I'd like to point out too is the windows you see there are actually pieces of plexiglass. Again, somebody had given me a chunk of plexiglass, and I just cut and made my own windows too in the thing. And also too, if you really look at the front edition of the shed, the wall height you see there is almost a full 8 feet tall. Where the door is and all that's pretty tall in there. And then with this Gambrel style roof, the barn style roof, it really opens up the space. And what you're seeing too, if you notice the cantilever over the front door, that's actually all storage above that. That's a giant shelf above that front door that when you walk in and turn around and look up, I've got a bunch of stuff stored up above that door, which I'm 5'11". I can walk through that door comfortably without bumping my head. I don't even have to duck. And then the shelf is another probably 2 feet above me, 1.5 feet above me. So that I'll show here in a minute. And this is kind of what it looks like today with the paint on it and everything. I still have to finish the trim, but I built this thing in the middle of the winter back 2 years ago. And like I say, with my medical problems, I'm a little slow at actually finishing it. But this is, what it looks like kind of like today with the color on it. And the tarp that you see is actually a full tarp I used to cover the roof, because when I was building it, it snowed, and then I put the roof panels over the top of that tarp, which the tarp ended up staying there. I'm just going to cut that out when I go to finish the trim work. And you can see here too, those roof panels are actually two different color. One is a natural steel color, and the rest were green. Like I say, beggars can't be choosers, and I got the tin roofing free from Craigslist, so I couldn't complain. In this photo here, you see where the ramp for the mower storage is complete, and it's actually in two pieces. The smaller part folds up out of the way, and then there's a pin that holds that open as the ramp is folded down. Another thing too to look at is the power going into the shed is actually that extension cord you see wound up, and it's just plugged into my box currently, because eventually the mobile home park that I live in is going to upgrade the box, and when they do, then I'll upgrade my electric. But right now it's just the whole shop's run off an extension cord, which this just made it easier to power everything. Now from the inside of the shop, this is looking at the back wall that you see facing that other roof. The old shed is in the background, and the door is right below that crate that reads chemicals on it. But that section there is going to get pushed out and become a loft over the original shed, and this will increase my storage capacity to 8 foot by 8 foot, which will be, like I say, almost 6 foot tall once it's in there. Up on that loft on the other side across from that, I can almost stand up, so it's probably closer to 5.5 feet, 5 feet, 5.5 feet at the center, which is still plenty of storage. I mean, it'll give me a ton of room to put things up there too. And really quick, stepping back outside, just looking up, this is that cantilevered section over the top of the front door, which shows you how much deeper you can make this if you cantilever your front or cantilever your roof. If you're going to go out further than 2 foot, though, I would recommend putting in bracing, even just a 45-degree angle bracing, to give you better control of weight off of that, just so it doesn't sag or bow, and you can go right into your beam for your post for whatever the corner of the building is. Now here in this photo, you see that's the storage shelf above the door, the little loft, the small loft I call it, and I know it's kind of a mess up there, but you can get quite a bit of weight on this thing. And because it works just like a regular loft in a barn, you can store quite a bit of things up there. I've got a couple of computer towers that are stripped out and whatnot. I got my broadcast spreader up there for when I fertilize my yard. I've got a bunch of coolers and like that, some other pipe, as you can see, some screen and stuff like that. But basically, yeah, I mean, that's that cantilevered shelf above the door, and I can walk under it just fine without having to duck under it or, worry about bumping my head or anything. It's probably a good, 6.5 feet, height-wise. Actually, I guess it would be like almost 8 foot height-wise. Another thing, too, I'd like to point out, looking at this next photo, is that I used the scrap OSB that I had from cutting the sides and, like that, to put the roof together and tie it all together. As far as holding the trusses 2 feet from each other, everything's 2 foot on center, and as far as the trusses go. And I use the scrap OSB as an underlayment under the tin roof. Now, you don't really have to do this, but I find that having the underlayment under the tin roof makes it a whole lot quieter in there in, say, like a rainstorm or whatnot. And I know a lot of people tell me that I'm nuts for putting a tin roof on my workshop, but they don't stop to look up at the roof and realize that wood that the tin panels is setting on actually insulates the sound in there, so you don't hear that pingy, pingy, ting, ting, ting noise when it's raining, or if we get a hailstorm or anything. You don't get any noise in there. And that's why if you look closely at the joints between the 2x4s, as far as where the OSB is, you'll notice in the left side of this how the OSB doesn't line up with the other one. There's actually a big space in it, which again shows you why I have that tarp there. You can see the tarp through it. You know, it wasn't like I actually thought this through, because had I thought this through, I would have bought the extra OSB originally to do this. And I did end up buying 2 sheets of OSB for the lower part of the roof to continue the same, you know, roof design, just to make it simpler. But again, I was kind of rushing for time because I built this thing in the middle of December, and we'd gotten like some really nice weather 2 years ago when I built it, and it was a 60-degree day when I started, and by the time I finished it, I was putting that roof on while we were getting almost a foot of snow. So it did make things a little more interesting for me going that route. Now, as far as tool storage, one wall, when you come into my shed, as you come through the door on the right hand side, is a whole tool wall, and I really like having the tools out where I can get to them, where I can see them and like that. But it's really kind of an inefficient design, and probably this summer, you see the squares that I have hanging here on the wall, I'm probably going to build a cabinet that mounts on this wall and compact some of the stuff I have stored in there. One advantage I have to the old shed is the roof is really low, and here I do a lot of storage using peanut butter jars. You could do the same with mayonnaise jars if you wanted to, and I have one of those Brother P-Touch labelers, so every couple of months I'll go in there and reorganize my peanut butter jars, and then I'll label, you know, what's in each of the jars. Even though you can see right through them, it really makes storing small things like screws and rivets and whatnot really convenient. And because that roof is so low, it's just over my head when I'm in the back part of the shed, which a lot of people have, you know, seen my peanut butter jars and they're like, wow, you're really organized. They've usually complimented me on my organization, even though really the inside of my shed right now is a mess, and I have to go out there and kind of clean it out here, you know, in another couple of months when we get better weather, being that it just snowed. Going back to this photo, you can see where that shed roof is on the newer part, the front part, is higher than the other roof. That's actually intentional. I plan to drag that whole roof line all the way out across the other roof, and that'll give me that 8-foot distance I need back and the 8 foot across. That whole thing is actually the whole beam that carries the load of that roof is all just 2 inches higher than the lean-to roof on the other shed. I'll build a floor out over the roof of that rear part of the shed there and carry that whole Gambrel style roof all the way out to the end of that. And of course, you know, this is the way the shed looks like currently. I still have some work to do on it this summer. And on the other side too, another thing I'll point out looking at the same photo is the fact that this part of the roof on the other side faces south, so that's where I'm going to mount solar panels eventually. And that concludes the video for my shed. I hope that you have enjoyed it.